You feel the pressure building behind your eyes, that familiar tightening in your chest when something moves you, but the tears never come. You tell yourself it's fine, that you've just grown stronger, tougher, more resilient. But that strength isn't strength at all, it's armor, and beneath that armor lies a simple, devastating truth. Somewhere in your past, you learned that crying was dangerous. Before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to The Fictionist, where we explore the hidden machinery of the human mind, the unseen forces that shape how we feel, love, and survive. The inability to cry is not a quirk of personality. It's a psychological adaptation, a survival mechanism crafted in response to emotional threat. For many, it begins in childhood. Maybe when you cried, no one came. Maybe you were told to stop being dramatic, or that tears were a sign of weakness. Or worse, maybe your pain was met with mockery, punishment, or silence. The lesson your nervous system learned was simple and brutal. Emotion equals danger. And so your brain, the most loyal protector you'll ever have, built a wall. That wall became emotional suppression. This is how the mind protects the child who has no power. If crying draws punishment, the mind cuts off the capacity to cry. If sadness leads to rejection, the mind buries sadness deep beneath layers of numbness and control. Over time, the body internalizes this message until the suppression becomes automatic. The tears don't just stop, the emotional processing behind them shuts down too. Crying is the body's natural release valve. Biochemically, it's how the nervous system regulates stress and returns to equilibrium. When we cry, our body releases stress hormones like cortisol, lowers blood pressure, and restores parasympathetic calm. But when the mind forbids crying, all that emotional energy remains trapped inside. It doesn't disappear, it just finds new disguises. For some, it becomes chronic tension in the body. For others, it manifests as anxiety, irritability, or emotional detachment. The pain is still there, but now it's frozen. Let's take an example. Imagine a child who grows up in a home where their parents argue constantly. Every time they cry out of fear, the parent dismisses it. Stop overreacting. Over time, that child learns to stay quiet, not just externally, but internally. By adolescence, they've perfected the art of composure. By adulthood, they become the calm one in every crisis, the reliable one who never breaks down. On the surface, they appear emotionally mature. But underneath, there's a dam ready to burst. Their nervous system is constantly in survival mode, holding back feelings it believes could destroy them. In clinical psychology, this phenomenon is often tied to alexithymia, the inability to identify or express emotions. But it's not that these people don't feel, they feel deeply, sometimes too deeply. The problem is that their connection between emotion and expression has been severed. The body senses the wave of sadness or grief, but the brain intercepts the signal before it reaches conscious awareness. It's like having a fire alarm that detects smoke, but has been programmed never to ring. Culturally, this suppression is reinforced. Boys are taught that crying makes them weak. Girls are told that tears make them hysterical. Adults are praised for keeping it together during tragedy. Society turns emotional repression into a badge of honor, confusing stoicism with strength. But the cost of this illusion is high, because every tear that S held back becomes emotional residue. Unprocessed grief that weighs on the mind, erodes relationships, and numbs the ability to feel joy. The irony is that emotional suppression masquerades as control, yet it controls you. You might think you're avoiding pain, but what you're actually doing is dulling every feeling, not just sadness, but love, excitement, connection. You can't selectively numb emotions. When you shut down one, you silence them all. That's why people who can't cry often describe their lives as emotionally flat. They function, they achieve, they appear fine, but they don't feel fine. They live behind glass.
The mind, of course, believes it's protecting you. It remembers how dangerous emotion once was. That's why when sadness starts to surface, you might feel sudden anger, distraction, or even physical discomfort. These are defense mechanisms, the mind's way of saying, "Don't go there." The repression was built for survival. But what once kept you safe as a child becomes your prison as an adult. The system that saved you now prevents you from truly living. There's a paradox here. People who can't cry are often the ones who've endured the deepest emotional wounds. Their inability to express pain is not a lack of depth. It is evidence of how much pain they've had to endure. Their nervous system adapted not because they were weak, but because they were too young to handle the magnitude of what they felt. So the mind froze it. It's like emotional cryogenic preservation, feelings stored for decades, waiting for safety that never arrived. Think of emotional suppression like a dam. Each uncried tear, each swallowed word, each moment of forced composure adds pressure to the structure. Over years, the water rises. Sometimes it leaks out as irritability or fatigue. Sometimes it cracks through during a random event, a song, a scene in a movie, a stranger's kindness. That's why people who never cry sometimes break down in unexpected moments. The dam didn't fail, it simply reached capacity. To understand this from a neuropsychological lens, consider that emotions are processed through both the limbic system, the emotional brain, and the prefrontal cortex, the rational brain. In those who learn suppression, the prefrontal cortex overcompensates. It inhibits the limbic signals before they fully register. The person rationalizes feelings instead of experiencing them. They say, "I shouldn't feel this way," or "crying won't help." It is not that they re-emotionally unaware. It is that their cognitive defenses dominate their emotional impulses. Over time, this imbalance can lead to emotional dysregulation. The inability to cry is not the absence of emotion, but the accumulation of unprocessed emotion. This internal backlog can manifest as chronic stress, dissociation, or even somatic symptoms like tightness in the chest, headaches, or fatigue. The body remembers what the mind refuses to feel. But let's be clear, not crying doesn't make someone broken, it makes them adaptive. It means that at some point, they survived by disconnecting from their emotional core. Crying would have made them vulnerable in an environment where vulnerability was punished. The suppression was never a choice, it was conditioning. Understanding this truth is the first step toward compassion, not self-blame. However, what once kept them safe now keeps them isolated. Emotional suppression interferes with intimacy. Relationships thrive on vulnerability, the exchange of authentic emotion. When someone can't cry, they also struggle to open up. Their partners often feel a distance they can't explain, an emotional gap that no amount of affection can bridge. The suppressed individual, meanwhile, feels guilty for being unable to connect. They might even think something's wrong with them, deepening the shame and reinforcing the repression. That's the tragic loop. Shame fuels suppression. Suppression creates isolation. Isolation reinforces shame, and around it goes. The tears that never fall, not weakness. They are messages from a body that no longer trusts it's safe to be seen. So the next time you find yourself unable to cry, don't label it as strength or emotional numbness. See it for what it is, a survival response, a sign that at some point, your nervous system learned to equate expression with danger. That inability is not your fault. It's evidence of your endurance. The question now ain't why can't I cry, but what happened that made crying unsafe. You've spent a lifetime holding it in, keeping yourself intact through composure, control, and silence. But beneath all that, your emotions are still waiting for permission to exist. The mind can suppress tears for decades, but the body never forgets how to weep.
You sit through the movie, the music swells, the scene is tragic, and everyone around you is sniffling. You feel the sting in your chest, the lump in your throat, but the tears don't come. You tell yourself it's fine. Maybe you're just not that emotional. But that's not the truth. The truth is darker, older, It's that somewhere in your life your mind learned that tears were dangerous. The inability to cry isn't a lack of feeling. It is the result of too much feeling, locked away for too long. It's what happens when the brain decides that showing pain will bring punishment, not comfort. For some, this starts in childhood, where emotions were treated like problems that needed fixing or flaws that needed hiding. Maybe you cried once and got scolded for it. Maybe you reached for comfort and were met with silence. Maybe you learned that vulnerability made you unlovable. So your nervous system did what it had to. It built walls. Those walls don't disappear. They grow with you. By adulthood, they look like self-control, composure, professionalism. You're the one who stays calm in chaos, who doesn't crumble, who gets praised for being strong. But inside, that strength isn't strength. It's a survival mechanism still doing its job long after the threat is gone. The tears don't fall because somewhere inside you, a part of you still believes it's not safe to be seen. From a psychological standpoint, crying is not just an emotional act. It's a physiological reset. When you cry, your parasympathetic nervous system activates. Your body releases stress hormones. Your breathing slows. It's how your brain processes emotional overload. But if crying was punished or mocked, your mind rewires itself to block that response. Over time, that becomes automatic. You feel sadness but can't express it. The nervous system cuts the circuit halfway, protecting you from what it still perceives as danger. Think of a child who grows up in a home where emotions are always met with dismissal. Every time they express pain, they're told, "Stop being dramatic," or "Crying won't fix anything." Eventually, that child learns to suppress, not because they want to, but because it's the only way to stay safe. By the time they grow up, the suppression is second nature. They can talk about pain logically, but can't feel it emotionally. Their brain has learned to intellectualize instead of process. This is why emotional suppression can be so deceptive. It masquerades as control. You appear composed, collected, calm, the rational one in every crisis. People look up to you, they say you're grounded. But what they don't see is that every moment of composure is also a moment of quiet tension. The constant effort to keep the dam intact. The same mechanism that once saved you from emotional chaos now isolates you from connection. You can't selectively block emotions. When you shut down sadness, you also dull joy, empathy, love. The emotional system doesn't have a mute, only this one feeling setting. So people who can't cry often describe life as muted, like watching everything through glass. They don't feel extreme highs or lows, they just function. And at first, that seems easier. But after years of suppression, it becomes emptiness. Neurologically, this suppression is measurable. When you feel emotion, your limbic system, especially the amygdala, activates. The prefrontal cortex, which handles reasoning and control, then interprets that feeling. In people conditioned to suppress, the prefrontal cortex overcompensates. It shuts down the emotional signal before it can trigger a physical response like crying. The person doesn't feel less emotion, they simply block its expression. That's why people who can cry often describe a vague heaviness, emotion without outlet. This emotional backlog doesn't disappear. It becomes stored energy, often manifesting as anxiety, irritability, or physical tension. Chronic muscle tightness, fatigue, digestive issues, these can all be somatic expressions of suppressed emotion. The body becomes the container for feelings the mind refuses to acknowledge. In trauma psychology, this is called body memory. The tears may not fall, but the body remembers every moment they were supposed to. And still, society praises emotional suppression. We're told to stay strong, move on, keep it together. Boys learn that tears make them weak. Girls learn that tears make them irrational. Adults internalize that composure equals control. The message is clear: vulnerability is dangerous. So we wear emotional armor so long we forget it's even there. We forget what unguarded emotion feels like, but the mind has limits. Emotional suppression works until it doesn't. One day, the wall cracks. It could be triggered by a breakup, a movie, a random act of kindness. Something small opens the floodgate and years of unprocessed pain rush forward. That's why people who never cry sometimes experience uncontrollable sobbing during moments that seem unrelated to their pain. The tears were never gone, just waiting for permission. Here's the paradox: the inability to cry is not a sign of coldness. It's a sign of deep care that's been suppressed for survival. It's the body's attempt to protect the heart. Those who cannot cry are often those who have loved most fiercely, been hurt most deeply, and learned too early that feeling deeply was unsafe. Emotional suppression is not a lack of empathy. It's empathy locked behind fear. When someone grows up equating tears with shame, the mind forms a subconscious rule. If I don't cry, I stay safe. That rule becomes self-reinforcing. The less you cry, the less safe crying feels. The nervous system interprets emotional vulnerability as danger. So even when you want to cry, you can't. It's like pressing a gas pedal while your foot's still on the brake. That's why forcing tears doesn't work. You can't intellectualize your way into crying. The wall isn't mental, it's physiological, rooted in your nervous system. What begins to soften it isn't effort, it's safety. Emotional safety is the key to unlocking emotional release. That safety can come from therapy, art, solitude, or connection. Anything that allows your mind to relax its guard enough to feel. When the mind finally realizes, I'm safe now, the tears come naturally. This is the hidden truth. Your tears are not weak. They are intelligence. They are the body's language for releasing what words can't. When they stop, it's not because you've become stronger, and it's because the body has learned silence as a defense. So when you watch that movie and feel nothing, don't judge yourself. When you attend a funeral and can't cry, don't assume you're heartless. Understand that your mind is still doing what it was trained to do, protect you. You survived by not crying. But survival isn't the same as living, and one day, perhaps unexpectedly, you'll feel it. That slow crack in the armor. Maybe a single tear slips out during a song, or in the quiet after an argument, or while sitting alone in your car. Don't push it away. That tear isn't weakness. It's your body finally remembering that it's safe to feel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to The Fictionist for more explorations into the hidden psychology of the human mind, where silence has meaning, emotion has memory, and even the tears that never fell have a story to tell.